On today's crossover episode with Locked On Predators, what will Scott Wedgewood bring to the Music City? Why Matt Duchene was a perfect fit in Dallas? And where do the Stars and Preds stack up in a jam-packed Central Division? That and more next.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Joey Erickson, former producer of 105 Through the Fan. Please be sure to subscribe. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making us a part of your day and making us your first listen. Welcome to a special crossover edition with our Central Division rivals, Locked On Preds. Me and Ann had an absolute blast putting together today's episode. I don't want to spoil too much of the conversation, but you all know the Predators have some shiny new toys in Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault, and touched on why the Preds were maybe willing to give out those deals to Marchessault and Stamkos. We discussed Scott Wedgewood and what he will bring to the Predators along with Juuse Saros. Of course, we caught up on Matt Duchene and his past season with the Dallas Stars, and we get into much, much more on today's episode. Shout out to all you everydayers out there. I'm excited to bring you some more fresh content in the next week or so. Plenty of crossover episodes with other NHL shows on the Locked On Podcast Network, and we had a lot of fun putting together today's episode, and I think you will really, really enjoy it. So I don't want to keep you too much longer. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Without further ado, this special crossover edition of Locked On Stars and Locked On Preds.
Joined now by Joey Erickson. He is the host of Locked On Stars, here to talk about Dallas, Nashville, and a very exciting Central Division coming up. So, Joey, first of all, thank you so much for jumping on. Of course, there's always a lot to talk about when you talk about Nashville and Dallas.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm excited to hop on. And Nashville looks new. They're the hot, new, fresh team in the Central Division, and both of these teams square off on opening night. So that will be a ton of fun.
It's going to be a great opening night. A little nerve-wracking, I think, but it is going to be a great opening night. Want to kick off by asking you about one of Nashville's newest signings that you know very, very well. Backup goaltender Scott Wedgewood joined the Nashville Predators, and very interested to get your insight about him. Of course, Nashville is really looking for that reliability in backup. They just re-signed Juuse Saros to a long 8-year deal, but they need that backup guy. Why is Wedgewood the right guy for Nashville?
Yeah, Scott will quickly become a fan favorite in Nashville. He is not only a fantastic person, but he really is a fantastic goalie in the fact that if you want reliability, he's going to be there. And more often than not, he gives your team a chance to win. Scott was also one of those netminders here in Dallas where he wasn't looking to take over the number one role. And that's exactly what Nashville's looking for. That is Saros's net. Right. So Wedgewood just needs to come in and give him a break every so often. And he was so reliable here in Dallas. Wedgewood last year was truly an unsung hero for the Stars. Ottinger was out for about a month with an injury. And without Wedgewood, who knows if the Stars stay in the top 3 of the Central? Who knows if they win the West or even win the Central and get home ice advantage throughout the playoffs? That was quite a big thing for Pete DeBoer and the coaching staff. So Wedgewood was a fantastic locker room guy as well. I know a lot of Stars fans are concerned about losing Wedgewood because him and Otter had such a fantastic relationship. It was just one of those perfect combinations that could weigh on Otter a bit into next year. That is something to keep an eye on, to see how Casey DeSmith, who is the new backup goaltender for Dallas and Ottinger get along. At the end of the day, it's still a business, of course, but those two had such a wonderful relationship. And I think Wedgewood is going to fit in great in Dallas, or great in Nashville, excuse me, like he did in Dallas. And Preds fans should have no worries about their backup goaltender. His numbers aren't amazing, but he did have his best career numbers in Dallas last season, and hopefully that continues.
How did Dallas utilize Wedgewood as far as starts with Ottinger? Because here in Nashville, we're used to UC Saros carrying such a heavy workload, but I feel like they may want to try to transition some of these starts to Wedgewood. So I'm curious how that worked between Ottinger and Wedgewood in Dallas.
Yeah, Ottinger the previous year played, I think, 63 games. He played a ton, and that was not the plan from the get-go.
Right.
That was because Wedgewood went down for an injury that they thought was going to be about a month, and it ended up creeping into, I want to say, about 2 months. It lasted quite a bit, so that forced Ottinger into the net quite a bit. Last year was a lot more like they had envisioned Otter and Wedgewood split time. So 53 starts for Ottinger, 28 for Wedgewood. I think somewhere in that range of 45 to 55 is where they would like Ottinger. I actually spoke on this on yesterday's episode of Locked On Stars because I was curious on how the split between him and DeSmith would be. So I think they got it down to about where they wanted to last year, where Ottinger's somewhere around 50 games because he's still really young and they haven't paid Ottinger yet. They're going to have to pay him next year. So if you can keep the miles down on him as long as possible, I think that's a good thing. And I'll be curious to see how Nashville uses him as well, just because if Saros is carrying a heavy workload, how are they going to fit Wedgewood in there? But it also helps come playoff time if your goaltender is a bit more fresh. And if they trust Wedgewood, they might be able to use him a bit more. And then your number one can be your number one come postseason time.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Even those of us here in Nashville are very curious how they're going to adjust UC Saros' starts with Scott Wedgewood in net. But definitely it feels good kind of knowing you have a really great safety net backup, signed here as well. I'm curious, what do you like? Nashville Predators fans saw some of Casey DeSmith in the postseason. He was injured. We ended up having to deal with Artur Shilovs, but saw enough of Casey DeSmith to know that this is a pretty significant backup goaltender as well. Why do you think Dallas went with DeSmith? What led to kind of not signing Wedgewood and going with DeSmith?
Yeah, the number one thing was he was a cap casualty. Jim Nill came out right away and said Wedgewood was a cap casualty, which can be a bit bizarre because it wasn't that much of a raise, but $500,000 is $500,000 in today's cap world, unfortunately. And I think Dallas really wanted to bring him back, but Jim Nill came out and said it was just a cap casualty. And DeSmith was able to sign for $1 million, which is what they were looking for over 3 years. And I think it just simply comes down to that because I don't believe it was for the lack of trying. So they went with DeSmith instead of Wedgewood, which I know hurt a lot of Stars fans. But as you mentioned, he is another pretty reliable netminder, and he got some postseason time. And as well as anybody, it's important to have two goaltenders that can play. You just have to, because injuries happen, and Vancouver knows pretty well you may have to go down to your third goaltender if need be.
And Nashville will tell you their third goaltender pretty darn good too.
Yes.
For sure. Want to pivot and talk to you about another player that we just have to talk about here. And I want to ask you about Matt Duchene. Of course, Predators bought him out last season, signed with the Stars. I'm curious what your takeaway was with Matt Duchene. What did he bring to the Stars this season? And do you feel like Dallas got their $3 million worth by signing Duchene last season?
Wow. I didn't show him enough love when the Stars initially signed him. I really didn't. I was still high on him, but I really wasn't expecting him to fit like a glove like he did last season. And I think number one, he became a player that the Stars could pair with Mason Marchment and Tyler Seguin. Those were two
Right.
guys they really struggled to find the perfect fit for. And as soon as Duchene seemed to step into the Lone Star state, he was perfect for Seguin and Marchment. Plus, he added some more offensive firepower. I was a bit hesitant on re-signing him here in the offseason because of what he did in the postseason. 6 points in the playoffs is just not going to cut it, because Duchene came here in order to win a Stanley Cup. He needs to
Right.
produce at the big moments. But again, at $3 million, it's just a no-brainer to re-sign him. And it also helps he is still getting paid by another team within the
You're welcome.
Central Division. So I guess he's probably not too worried about his checkbook at this point. So I just think Duchene was a perfect fit here in Dallas. There are some things that can get him into trouble sometimes in terms of stick handling. I think trying to do a bit too much, but
Yes.
he gave Dallas a player that can score. And I think what really helps him here in Dallas as well is he doesn't have to be the guy. And I think at other places, whether that's Columbus, even Nashville, you could speak to this better than I could, but he's not carrying the load of having to be the scorer that has to score and produce these big numbers. He can just kind of be behind the scenes a little bit, and Johnston and all these other guys are getting all this love, the young guys, and he can just be a complimentary piece. And I think that suits him best here in Dallas at this stage of his career.
That's such a great point, and I think it really does speak to maybe why Dallas was a really good fit for him last season and anticipating probably again next season. I do want to ask you real quick about Joe Pavelski. He is retiring. What does that mean for the Dallas Stars moving forward?
Yeah, well, they obviously are going to lose a huge locker room presence, and it was hard to believe that he was in Dallas for 5 years as well. I think many Stars fans feel like he's been here his entire career,
It
and I
feels
think
like that.
yeah, I think that just shows you what type of impact he has, and I think his impacts on the organization are going to have lasting effects just because the way he prepared for the game, the way he was such a professional. You hear the stories that come out of the Stars organization early on his tenure here in Dallas about how you wouldn't have a ton of guys go out early in the mornings and, continue to work on their craft. And then all of a sudden, as the years went on, there was like a little crew of, 5 to 10 guys that were out there working with Joe. You always see those videos of morning skates tipping every puck that gets shot his way. And there was a little crew that came out and started to do that, started taking a bit more time in their preparation. And I think that only sets up Dallas for success. And you look at what he has done for the younger players like Wyatt Johnston. That's pretty well documented, him living there. And I think Logan Stankoven is another that's going to benefit for that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. In terms of play on the ice, I think a lot of people believe it's going to be addition by subtraction, which is unfortunate to say. But Joe was getting at the end of the tank.
Right.
He was a liability, especially in the postseason. He just didn't have the juice, and that's to no fault of his own. And we're still talking about a guy that put up 65 points last year in the regular season,
Right.
But which is remarkable. And at 38 years of age, or maybe 39, can't even remember. It doesn't matter. It really didn't matter. He was fantastic. So they'll miss a leader, number one. And I think you'd be silly not to say that wouldn't have an impact because he was a huge part of things here in Dallas.
Yeah. Some other off-season moves for both of the teams that we're going to be talking about coming up in a minute, and some questions for Nashville. We're going to talk about those in just a moment. Want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. Look, we all love the sports. We love them so much, we don't ever want them to stop. But right now, the playoffs are over. We're getting fewer games, and the sports, they are not sportsin' like we want them to. But FanDuel is going to let you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Joey, want to know, do you have any questions about the Nashville Predators? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but we've been a little busy.
Yes, I have plenty of questions. Obviously, they are the sort of the darling of the National Hockey League with what they did in the in free agency. So I'm curious how you view their moves. Of course, Stamkos and Marchessault are great players, but there always is a little hesitancy to give money to some older guys. But
Right.
how do you view the moves in free agency?
Well, it was exhausting personally, just
Yes.
because July 1st, in the span of what felt like 3 minutes, everything with the Nashville Predators changed. And like you mentioned, these are signings of some elder statesmen in the league. If we're being honest, we talk about hockey years here at Locked On Preds. It's a little different when you're looking at somebody in their 30s and calling them old. But here's what I will say. I think Nashville was a little bit less hesitant about signing players, of course, of the caliber of Marchessault and Stamkos at their age, because last season there was so much success with Ryan O'Reilly and Gustav Nyquist, who came in, and Luke Schenn, who came in a little bit older, and they really had great seasons here. Gus Nyquist had a career high in goals, assists, and points last season. So I think that Nashville is not afraid to bet on a little bit of the veterans, despite maybe age being something that would scare some other teams off. I also think that Nashville is really working to reset a culture.
Yeah.
And to do that, they want to bring in what Barry Trotz refers to as the serial winners, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, we've got Ryan O'Reilly, we've got Luke Schenn. And I think we saw, even in the course of just this one season, how different the locker room and the expectations and the day in and day out execution of things is impacted when you bring in guys who can say, we made it to the Stanley Cup final and this is how hard you have to work. So I think on ice and off ice, Nashville just maybe doesn't have the hesitancy this season to sign older players. And look, if you can get Steven Stamkos, you get Steven Stamkos.
Yeah. I mean, he's a year removed from 40 goals, which is
right.
Which is pretty remarkable at his age as well. And another question I did want to ask you about the Preds, and maybe this was another reason why Trotz didn't feel the need to pass on guys like Marchessault, Stamkos, is some of those young, talented forwards. I think Nashville's just a really tough matchup against Dallas last year because they have some big, just strong wingers like Evangelista and multiple others that play really well. Out of those young guys, who are you really, really excited about for next season? Or maybe who would you bet on to kind of have that breakout year?
You absolutely said the name, and that is Luke Evangelista. And this is a young player who comes into the league and last season struggled at times to kind of understand Andrew Brunette's new system, to understand play away from the puck. But after the All-Star break, he really sort of turned a corner, and you saw his game get better. And even though maybe statistics-wise he didn't jump off the page in the postseason, he really played at a level where you thought, okay, I'm seeing this young player develop. Luke Evangelista is the player I think everybody in Nashville is kind of holding their breath to say, this may be the year that he steps forward even more and becomes more of a potential star. It would help tremendously where he plays in the lineup. For instance, Steven Stamkos has said, look, I'm open to playing center. Well, if you can do that and you can put Jonathan Marchessault and Luke Evangelista on the wing, that is an opportunity for Luke Evangelista that may not come along again in his career to play with those two. So I think when you're looking at young players that Nashville is really sort of holding their breath for and saying this may be the season, Luke Evangelista is the first guy that comes to mind for us.
Yeah, I'm curious too. That seems like a Stars playbook right there. Put the young gun with the with the
That's
older
right.
guys, the guys
Yeah,
that have been around
I've
for
heard that works.
yes, yeah. No, it does all right. It does all right. We can attest to that. I am curious as well, just about UC Saros, because there was just rumors flying
Oh
everywhere,
gosh.
and of course it didn't happen. What did you make of it? It felt like a saga. It did feel like sort of like a saga with him in Saros. Was he going to be dealt? Was he not? Are you happy he's here in Nashville? I'm sure you are. How could you not want a number one netminder like Saros? But what did you make of that whole saga, which seemed to last a few months?
It was dog years. I'm
Yeah,
not going to lie. It felt like dog years here. And it was difficult because you knew that there were teams who would be interested in Saros, but you also know that Barry Trotz realized what he had in him. I will say this, very glad that he has resigned with the Nashville Predators. A lot of people in the fan base wanted him traded because he was such a valuable trade piece. But I
yeah.
always say just because somebody is your most valuable trade piece doesn't mean you want to trade them. They may be more valuable staying here. And I believe that's true for UC Saros. What complicated it is this young, spicy backup goaltender that we have, Yaroslav Askarov, and people are saying it's his time. My take on this is Yaroslav Askarov is going to be an NHL goaltender, and he is going to knock people's socks off. But you cannot over marinate a goaltender. And I think he needs more time. And the Scott Wedgewood signing, I think, may under the radar be one of the most important signings the Predators do to transition effectively in net. It gives Askarov time to grow. It gives UC Saros the net for a window now where the Predators could be deep cup run contenders. And the great thing about signing Saros is it didn't set the team back. It gave them an opportunity to win in more of a win now mode. And I don't think Stamkos or Marchessault would have signed with the Nashville
Yeah.
Predators if you didn't have UC Saros in net, because they want to be on a team that can contend. And as much as I love, and oh friend, I love Yaroslav Askarov,
Yes.
you are not a contender if he is your goaltender in net. So for me, I think the UC Saros signing was really critical to Nashville getting the other pieces they got in free agency.
I think that's a fascinating point too about Wedgewood. It feels sort of like the backup QB conversation where it's that young and fresh, hot backup
Yes.
QB. And if, let's say, Saros has a bad game or he has a bad week, then everybody's coming after Nashville to put in Askarov, put him in,
Yes.
if he's your backup. So Wedgewood does give him that kind of buffer. It's like, okay, Wedgewood's our guy. Okay, he's gonna
Yeah.
sit in the AHL and play.
I think Scott Wedgewood is going to be the most important goaltender
Yeah.
signing in the Predators' history. I
Wow.
really do. I think he is that
Yeah.
important at this time for the Nashville Predators. So people are talking about Stamkos, and rightly so, and Marchessault and Brady Skjei, and rightly so. But I'm telling you, Scott Wedgewood is such an important key to Nashville being in, contend soon and also be more ready to contend later when Yaroslav Askarov is ready.
Yeah, absolutely. One more for you about
Mhm.
Nashville, because I do have to ask you about this postseason run, because they did go on a tear in the last really month and a half of the season to get in. I know there was a lot of talk about the Stars kind of going into Nashville and beating them pretty badly, and people thought that, well, maybe the postseason was out of the question. But man, they pulled up the bootstraps and they got in, and they gave Vancouver everything they could handle. From your perspective, what really changed after that Stars game? Was something on the ice that just changed, or is it just simply sometimes, man, they just played so much better?
You all embarrassed us so bad on February 15th.
Yes.
And it really was like a come to Jesus moment
Uh-huh.
where I think they all were like, okay, we can't do
Yeah.
that again. They went on that 18 game point streak. And I think part of it too was just time. I think it took a long time for the players to adjust to what Andrew Burnett really wanted
Mhm.
from them. And then after that February 15th game, which will go down in infamy here. Oh
Yes,
my gosh.
seriously.
It was excruciating.
No
In
you
case
two
you were
either?
wondering. No, you too. No,
Barry's like,
ma'am.
"Nope."
No, ma'am. We went into media after that game, and Andrew Brunette made this comment, and he was, of course, very disgusted about the performance. But he said, "I think everybody's just thinking too much about their vacation." And
Wow.
at this point, we didn't know anything about the Sphere and U2 tickets and the team
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
And we were like, what is that about? What is he
Mhm.
talking about? Well, they did not go to the Sphere or to U2. But I do think part of it was that was a huge wake up call game. I do think timing wise, things started to click for the team. And, I think they were really excited to get an opportunity in the postseason. Like, I think that they became very hungry. And when you have players like Roman Yossi, when you have players like Ryan O'Reilly and Gustav Nyquist who want it, they're veterans. They know how hard it is and
Yeah.
they want it so bad. I really think that some of that really kicked in the second half of the season for the Preds. So, I mean, I would say thank you, but it was humiliating. So,
Hey,
let's
sometimes you need to kick in the rear. My dad does it to me enough, so I
that's
completely
right.
understand. But I think that's good too. Sometimes you gotta sort of change the culture as you alluded to a bit earlier. And I think that's something the Stars went through early in the 2010s, right? 2013, 2014, where they were coming out being pretty abysmal. They had to change the way they thought and the way they went about their business, and winning eventually becomes almost addicting, right? And
right.
it becomes just normal that you win. And I think the young players in Nashville will take that experience and run with it. That's a really big thing for them as well, to get that taste of postseason. So now they know. And then you
Yeah.
bring in your Stamkos and Marchessault, man, you're ready to hit the ground running next year.
It's gonna be fun to watch. Coming up, we are going to take a look around the Central Division, make some predictions for our team, and talk about where we see things wrapping up at the end of the season. All right, Joey, the Central Division, it is a juggernaut.
Mhm.
People have, talked to us about, where do you see Nashville finishing? And I'm like, it would be so different if we weren't in the Central, y'all.
Yes.
The Central Division, it is a whole thing. I'm just curious from Dallas's perspective, what has the offseason meant as far as keeping Dallas's window open as far as contending? Because I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of people in Nashville felt like maybe last season Dallas was going to get there.
Yeah, you and me included.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people were on Dallas, and they looked really good through the
they
first
did.
few rounds. And I think there was a combination of running out of gas and just not scoring enough, and getting McJesus. he's
Oh gosh, yeah.
he's so good. But in terms of their window, I think it's still really, really wide open for a number of reasons. They just have such good young talent up front, and that's a courtesy of the Dallas Stars front office. They've done a fantastic job of drafting young guys and getting value for some of their picks, like Logan Stankoven, who was second round, and Johnston was found at 23rd overall. Those are two key core guys moving forward, along with Jason Robertson and Rope Hintz, who is still rather young in terms of hockey years. So there is a
Right.
lot of excitement revolving around this Stars team. But when you look at the offseason, and I'm one to be a bit critical about it, because I think many were expecting that big splash defenseman to kind of come in here and really shore up the back end, because you lost Chris Tanev, who was obviously an integral part of the Dallas Stars defense when he was acquired in February. Unfortunately, they weren't going to be able to come to terms with him. So you go out and you sign guys like Matt Dumba, Labushkin, and Smith. And those three guys are good players, but probably past their prime. So it'll be really intriguing to see how they all kind of get into the fold here in Dallas, because I don't necessarily believe that is going to get them over the hump. I still think they're a trade away. I think they're going to have to go to the
Right.
trade deadline and go get another guy like they did with Tanev to truly contend for a Stanley Cup. In terms of the Central Division, I think they're going to be right up there in
Mhm.
the top three. Again, I would assume. I don't think they're going to match 113 points like they did a season ago. That was the second best year in franchise history. I feel like it's 105 points, and that would put them third if you based it off the standings last year. I think that's kind of where they hover around. But as you mentioned, there's just so many teams that are mixed into the fold, and Nashville can make this big jump. Winnipeg just seems to be pretty steady.
Right.
Colorado's Colorado, right? It's just you
Cut
just
us
have
a
this
break, Avalanche.
yeah, they just this huge traffic jam of really, really good teams. But I would expect Dallas to sort of be in the top 3 again, maybe contend for a central title. And hopefully they're in the right spot. I guess the biggest thing is try not to get Colorado and Vegas in the first 2 rounds
Oh
like
my
they did this year.
gosh. Yeah, that was not nothing. You all did not have an easy path
Yeah,
by
yeah.
any stretch of the imagination. Who is a veteran player that you really feel like is going to carry Dallas next season?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Man, I feel like I could go anywhere with
Mhm.
that one. In terms of carrying, that's tough because I feel like it's the young guns' time. Like they
Yeah.
have really shouldered some of that load. But if I had to go to one right now, it would be Jamie Benn. I feel like if you asked me a couple months ago, it would be different. But Ben is in the final year of his contract. He's going to be 35 at the end of next season, looking for a new home or possibly stay with Dallas. I'm still teetering on if he's going to come back or not. That's going to be interesting. Sort of another Stamkos deal. Not
Right.
quite the premier player that Stamkos has been, but a guy that has been a captain for over a decade here in Dallas. And he's had a great few past seasons in terms of his offensive game kind of resurging. And I think that has a lot to do with Wyatt Johnston. Those two paired together have been fantastic. He really, really stepped up this past postseason, was one of the Dallas Stars' best players. He got a lot of flack for what he did in that Vegas series a few years ago against Mark Stone, which inevitably pretty much just knocked the Stars out of the Western Conference Final when he took that really, really bad penalty. And he physically willed the Stars through the postseason a few months ago, and it was really something to watch. And he's been a fantastic captain here in Dallas, and I feel like his resurgence in his offensive game is going to continue to grow, and that can only mean good things for the Stars. Yeah, I really enjoyed watching Jamie Benn this past year, and there was a few years there it was just, man, it was like it just didn't have it felt like. But he's got a little youth injection, and that's a good thing for Stars fans.
Yeah, for sure. I think here in Nashville, we don't quite know what to expect yet.
Yeah.
And it's hard. We're trying to sort of temper expectations because yes, you are bringing in Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, of course, Brady Skjei joining the blue line, which is going to be a really important addition as well. But I think it's going to take Nashville a little bit of time to find that chemistry again because Steven Stamkos, dynamic, but also played for his entire season with one franchise. He's been with, very similar line mates for a long period of time. He's so great on the power play, but that's a power play unit he's been on for a very long time. So I think Nashville, as exciting as this is, I think the beginning of the season is going to be a little bit of hot and cold in the sense that they're going to have to settle in and kind of find the right chemistry. And getting Stamkos and Marchessault and even Brady Skjei to kind of get used to what Andrew Brunette wants. But here's hoping that the timing works out right because timing is so important in an 82 game regular season. If they can kind of get things together from the All-Star break on, it really feels like in Nashville, they are a team that could definitely make the postseason. I think the expectation is you're going to make the postseason and you are going to win a first round series. Come hell or high water.
Wow.
They have got to win a first round series. Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah, be aggressive. Absolutely. And I mean, Stars went through this sort of transition too with Joe Pavelski, where he played with one franchise for years and came over. And he did get off to a bit of a slow start. And that was that COVID year. So it was really, really weird. But he wasn't that 65 point player right at the beginning. So Stamkos may have to get his feelings down. And you also have to take into account, right? Like Pavelski and Stamkos have done, Pavelski prior to coming to Dallas have done the same routines for a decade, like going to the same places. They eat in the same spots. They go home to the same place. And that really has to be taken into account because they're really kind of just machines to some degree. It's a terrible way to put it, but they have routines and they do it every single day. So that there will be a bit of a learning factor for Stamkos. And yeah, if the timing works out, you get to game 40 and it feels like everything's starting to roll together, man. Yeah, they could be a dangerous team come postseason.
Yeah, well, of course, the season is going to kick off with our two teams facing off. Y'all are going to come to Bridgestone Arena. Lord, do not let it be a 9-2 game.
I think I can go on a limb and say it won't be that.
Oh, Lord.
Are you going to start? Hey, people want to know, are we starting Wedgewood? I think he should get the start against his old team.
If it weren't the first game of the season, I would say yes, but pretty much buckle up. You're seeing UC Stars.
Yes. Fair enough.
That's right. Well, hey, Joey, it is always great to connect with our Central Division rivals. Love connecting in and learning more about Wedgewood, catching up on Matt Duchene, and sharing what's going on with our respective teams. Before we sign off, can you let everyone know where they can find your podcast and where they can find you on social media?
Absolutely. You can find me free and available wherever you get your podcast, Locked on Stars. Of course, we're on YouTube as well. You can follow me at Joey the Jet 19. I spew my opinions on there every once in a while too, along with other things. But thank you so much for having me on, Ann. This was a ton of fun. Hopefully we get to maybe catch up before opening night. Maybe you can do a preview together. That'd be some fun.
I think we should definitely do that. We'll have training camp under our belts and we'll have a better idea of what chaos is going to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you once again.
Thanks so much. And we will be back tomorrow, both of us on our respective channels with all new episodes. We'll see you then.